right, the pretty lady tells me recording is in progress, so that means I can talk now. Welcome to Bolded Slugs, the podcast. My name is Zeus Ryan. Today we have Ty Leisher on the program. Tell the people how you are, Ty.
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on, Zeus. It's
Good.
great to put a face to the X, I guess, as they say.
You know, I have long held the belief, mostly because it was drilled into me by various family members, that I have a face for radio and a voice for print. So I figured, why not bless everyone, as the immortal sovereign, swear fealty to me, and your offerings of roasted meats will happily be accepted. Yeah, most of the people that I talk to have all had strike banners on there. so for many months I couldn't tell you who I was talking to, couldn't remember a name, but definitely happy to be putting faces to names, especially you. I am happy to have you on the program because especially of late, your tweets have been incredibly informative, especially for the kind of independent filmmaker, especially the budget conscious, and quite frankly, for people who I hit the ceiling at like directing. Obviously, when I'm writing something, I have the visual image in my head. I'm directing the movie in my brain. I try to put it on the paper. But that's as far as I go unless someone asks me a direct question like, is this outside, inside? What do you think the house looks like? Stuff like that. So for you to basically drop what I think are massive knowledge bombs in terms of, you want to shoot a $30,000 to $60,000 film? This is how. Oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, my video cut out. Screw it. It's all audio anyway. What do we need video for?
There you go.
I can edit that out, but I won't because I hate editing. So we're doing it, and we're doing it live like Big Daddy Bill told us to. So basically, like, where, other than experience having to do it, how do you like know all of the stuff that you know? Like, was there a book you read? Is there a super secret file? Or is it literally just, I had to take 50 grand from a dude one time and just figure it out?
I think it's a lot of, I didn't read a book. I didn't really take a course. It's knowledge that I gained over the last 15 years. And for me, one of the reasons why I started sharing it on X or Twitter is that I wanted to give people a shortcut that I didn't have, because nobody wants to talk about this stuff. Nobody wants to talk about the nitty gritty, like, this is how you do it. This is the percentages that are going to come out. This is what a sales agent is going to take. This is how much money you can actually make on a movie with no recognizable talent, no name talent. You obviously have a recognizable talent
for sure.
And so I wanted to share it, and I wanted to give people that opportunity to have that kind of shortcut. And for me, it was just, I obsess over this stuff. I stay up at night thinking about it. It's always on my mind. I always have an Excel spreadsheet open, kind of analyzing other films, other deals, and really just doing due diligence when I don't need to, because it's fascinating to me. And I got into the sales and acquisition side of this business because I wanted to learn about that, because I thought, I had been a indie filmmaker. I made a web series. It didn't go anywhere. It went on YouTube. Nobody really saw it. And then as
did most web series, really, other than a couple, but it was all the rage for about 15 minutes, like 10 years ago.
Yeah, 2011, 2012, it was super great. We were all riding high making web series, and nobody was watching them. And had I known now what I knew, or had I known then what I know now, I would have made a feature. I would have put it together as a feature. It was a feature length web series anyway. But at the end of the day, I didn't know back then what I know now. And so I've spent really the last, decade learning distribution and sales and acquisitions and making contacts with folks to better my understanding of the industry, so I can help other filmmakers really get a first, second, third shot at making a movie.
And really now coming out of the strikes, well, at least one. The other one is maybe there's a ratification vote still kind of pending as of recording. But what does the independent filmmaker space, for people that I feel I'm talking to, are the writers on the cusp, on the come up, looking to break in, but maybe seeing things in the industry taking a turn that might lead them in the direction of, well, maybe I fund it myself, maybe I do it myself. Where do you see the industries going, say in the next 12 to 18 months, in terms of that independent filmmaker sort of vibe? Is it viable? Is it the the death knell? Because it used to be an escape, but a lot of people were outliers doing it. Uh, what does it look like in your estimation?
I think the independent scene, which really didn't start, but was kind of prevalent in the '90s, and Robert Rodriguez and Kevin Smith came up making their indie films and really gaining popularity in that regard. But I think that the time of making a film for $23,000 and then selling it to a distributor where you're gonna, they're gonna pump a ton of money into it, and then you're gonna make a bunch of money off of it, are kind of gone. I think the the current market for independent films, there is still a market for it. There will always be a market for it, I think. But there's two aspects to it. The first is uh, how do independent films get financed? And a lot of that is used to be pre-sales and tax incentives and getting some debt and some equity and all this other stuff. People are buying less, and people want recognizable talent in their pre-buys, and so pre-selling is getting tougher unless you have big names, and it's tough to get big names without money. So understanding how independent films are distributed and how they're bought and how they get financed is, I think, super critical to any aspiring producer and any aspiring filmmaker. But in terms of where we're headed, I think independent is still going to be a viable outlet for filmmakers. There's still going to be, the Neons, the A24s, the larger independent distributors that are making these bigger movies and winning Oscars doing it, like Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's tougher now to get financing for a film. You have to try to make it for as little as possible, going into it thinking that you're not going to make a ton of money, and you always want to swing low, and you get a single, and careers are made off of singles. Every once in a while, if you get a home run or a double, great. But it's all about getting another at bat, taking another swing, and getting on base.
To further the sports analogy, it's better to be an Ichiro than it is to be, say, Mike Trout. I don't people who hit home runs. I don't know. I was a
Yeah.
pitcher, so I'm more concerned about making sure people don't get on base at all, and that is definitely not the metaphor that we're running with. You mentioned A24, and I want to pitch this to you in that Everything Everywhere All at Once, I think, was I don't want to say flash in the pan. I mean it more in the way that, oh, look at this thing. We didn't know it was coming. We had no idea what it was, and then boom, it exploded. It's a fantastic thing. And A24 is like, well, this is just what we do. But as a couple weeks ago, they put out, in the press that they're looking to make more mainstream stuff. So what do you think it says to people when kind of an independent bastion is like, oh yeah, we got to get some of that mainstream too, because we're unable to rely on the Everything Everywhere All at Once's. We need
Right.
more. Is that a, we need to make more mainstream stuff to make more of the independent stuff, or are they going mainstream? And do you have any sort of indication that that's what's happening?
I think that it's, and this is all speculation, but I think that it's that they want to make the bigger stuff to continue to make the smaller stuff, the more independent stuff. And at the end of the day, a company like A24, any distributor, any real sales agent, they're gonna have a pretty good understanding of what the audience, where the audience is, what they're looking to watch, how much they're willing to pay for it, and how much of an audience is out there for it. And
Right.
they'll ultimately come down to a number where you can make a movie for $1 million, you can make it for 10 million. It's all just a matter of scale and how polished and how big of actors you're going to get. Um, I think that even if A24 goes entirely mainstream, there will still be a new company that comes in to shepherd the A24 spirit in the independent world.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how these companies ebb and flow, right? They start small, they grow, they get to a point where they're fighting with excuse me, they get to a point where they're fighting with the big dogs, um, for releases, and then other companies rise up below them to take their spot. Um, there's a power vacuum in that, and I think that there will always be someone to shepherd the independent spirit into fruition.
Well, one would hope, because otherwise the Independent Spirit Awards wouldn't have any movies to give stuff out to. So fair play,
That's true.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So circling back to kind of like the writing of it, what types of scripts? I mean, this is probably too broad of a question, but I'm an idiot and I'm going to ask it anyway.
Do it.
Uh, Most people probably aren't writing as their break-in material the blockbuster. Don't get me wrong, they probably got a fucking script, just a we're doing it live sort of thing. But in terms of material you're presenting people, you probably want it to be more palatable. But with the limited amount of things that are being made, the expensive amount of money being put into those limited things that require historic returns, plus then now we're in an era where full-on completed things are just not released at all. Where does someone looking to bust in, is there, I mean, horror comes to mind, constantly low budget, making massive returns, but that usually comes in every other couple years kind of things, when one, it's not full on annual where a horror movie is successful every year. It's a couple years. Is that the only genre that people can make for cheap? Is there something that works beyond that?
Yeah, the reason why horror does so well, number one, horror has a very voracious audience in the United States and the world.
Absolutely.
Right, there are people who love to watch horror, even if it's bad horror. They want to watch it, they want to be a completist. There's a lot of horror fans that do that, and so if you like horror, write something that's a horror script. I think you need to write the story that you want to tell, that is true to you, and you can't follow the market, you can't follow trends, because by the time you catch up to a trend, it's already gone, and you've moved on. And like you said, there's only a certain number of horror films that break out every year, and trying to bank on that is really tough. The other reason that horror does really well is because it travels overseas well, where there's not an English speaking, into territories that aren't English speaking, as their primary language, France, Italy, Germany, where you can still get the horror of it, the sense of dread, the scariness,
Mm-hmm.
without understanding the language at all. And likewise, somebody that makes a German horror film, you can still understand the context and the movie, even if you don't speak the language. Um, Other genres that play well like that are ones that don't involve a lot of talking, or don't involve a lot of inside jokes or innuendo or understanding of language, right? So action, horror, sci-fi, those three, and fantasy as well to a certain extent, play really well overseas, and they're a lot easier to make your money back. Uh, Dramas, comedies, romance, those are tougher sells because you have to understand the language. There's more nuance to it.
Yeah, nuance.
And
I was gonna say that's the
yeah,
romance in the West and the romance in uh, Asia, or even non English speaking primarily countries. Yeah, I could see how that would get lost in translation, pun intended.
yeah. Or like a comedy, that's, if it's a very slapstick comedy, cool, like it'll travel pretty well. If it's more of like a talky comedy, then it's not going to travel as well, and you're not going to get as much sales from buyers in, distributors in Germany or the Middle East or wherever you're trying to get into. um so I think if you're trying to write a script that you're going to break in with, um number one, if you can get into studio, great, the studio world, but it's really hard to break into that. I don't recommend counting on that. I think Mark Duplass has a really good keynote from the 2015, I think, South by Southwest, where he says the cavalry isn't coming. And I listen to that once a month, because the essence of that talk is that no one is coming to help you. No one is going to show up on your doorstep with a bag full of cash and say, "Let's go make your movie." Right? You have to go out and do it yourself. You have to be your own cavalry and take care of it yourself, because no one's coming to help you unless you get the ball rolling yourself. Um, so if you like sci-fi, horror, or action, write something in that genre. You can always cross it with, action comedy. If you really want to go comedic, uh, horror comedy is kind of a tough sell right now. But you've always got like the Shaun of the Deads, and if you lean more towards the horror aspect of it, it could do well. Um, but really, at the end of the day, just I think writing something that's true to yourself and in a genre that you love, and you're not trying to just play to what you think the market wants. You'll write a good enough script and it'll get you noticed. And if you can make it for 30 to 60,000, um, you're you're well on your way to making your money back and getting a second at bat.
So I guess the key question then becomes, uh, who has the money? Where is the money? Because historically, it's been the the studios, the distributors, the big names, which are getting fewer and fewer as time rolls by. It used to be there were many options, and now we're looking back fondly at, hey, remember all those companies that made good movies that don't exist anymore? The halcyon days of 1997.
Yeah.
Uh, so where it's a stupid question that I am just like, $50,000 for me is like life changing money. 10 grand is life changing money. And to some people, that's a rounding error. Who are we going to? Who are the financiers for these types of things that are going to be willing to take the risk that the studios or traditional distributors used to be the ones that did that?
I think, and I know this is cliche to say, and everybody will groan and roll their eyes, but it comes down to friends and family for the most part on a $50,000 budget, and you're not getting that from one person. You're getting 2,000 from your uncle, and you're getting 5,000 from a friend that's in real estate, and you're cobbling together um, this amount of money from 10, 15 friends or investors or friends of friends. Um, I think the reason why it's so tough to get financing for a film that's that low is because you can't get recognizable name actors, and you're not going to have a recognizable director. So the risk factor is so high that traditional investors don't want it. They're not getting enough of a return. You have to find someone that loves movies,
Mm-hmm.
that has money, that works in a different field but wants to support you um and see the film made and be excited about being in the movie industry and being a film investor. Um, at $50,000, you can make your money back pretty safely at that level. The closer you get to 100,000, the riskier it gets, and anything over 100 for a first time film with no recognizable names as director or cast is really hard to make that money back. And so I think working from a what are the next steps? What can I do? Number one, find a sales agent that you think would be good for the film. They can help you. They can provide some sales estimates. We do it all the time at my company, and the sales estimates are going to be low, but you understand and you take a conservative approach to it, and you make the movie for less than the sales agent says you're going to make back, and you ultimately will hopefully sell to a North American distributor or a worldwide distributor and make your money back. um, the investors have to know at that level that you're probably not going to make money, and they have to be okay losing all of it. And for
A little bit
traditional
of a haircut is
investors,
kind of implied.
yeah, for traditional investors, it's they don't want that risk. Why do that when they can just park their money into a treasury bond and get 5% in the next year?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Especially with rates being, approaching six, things like that, if not higher. I mean, other people would argue that those numbers going up are indicative of another '08 housing crisis and bubble. So you're gambling either way, but yeah, why would I take a chance on this small indie darling sort of thing when I could just pop it in a CD and call it good?
yeah. I'll add, if you're looking for money and you have a great script and you think you have some potential to it, and you're looking for less than 50,000, you can approach some sales agents. You can approach some distributors and see if they'd be interested to pre-buy the film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, without anything being produced in the past, it's really hard because you don't have a track record. But if you have someone on your team, whether it's a producer or somebody executive producer that can vouch for you and say, yeah, this movie will get done, and we're going to finance it, and when it's done, will you buy it for 30 grand? Um, some distributors, some sales agents will say yes. They may back you, they may give you the money. Um, that's the tricky part about independent film finance, is that the money comes from everywhere, but nowhere in particular, and that's just baffling.
It's the grassroots kind of political thing. Is like, I want my campaign to be run on $100,000 donations as to a couple 20, 30, 50s, because it's all a matter kind of scale at a certain level. I get that. In terms of like where the market could be going, we hear a lot, and by we I mean, the kind of the unrepped, newer people to the industry. We hear all the time, like you've said it, and I don't mean to have it be phrased as like a cliche thing, because there is validity to it. But be true to yourself. Write your voice, write the story that you want to write, that sort of thing. And people are clamoring for new voices, but all we are getting is the superhero fatigue. That's an argument in and of itself. I'm just saying that as a thing that gets thrown around. What
Right.
is the market now post strike, where, in my estimation, the industry is desperately trying to pretend that none of this ever happened and everything is normal? How long are we waiting until new voices pop up? When will there be like another Paranormal Activity type thing that, like, I made it for 50 cents and I made 7 billion? Like, when are those types of things going to happen? Is that a year out, 2 years out, when production gets back to a regular kind of slate?
Yeah, I think that it's tough to say when that big outlier moment is going to happen for an independent film. One that I've been tracking that I think has some potential, and it's not really truly independent, but it kind of started that way, is the Backrooms movie. If you're familiar at all with that, started out this, I think, 17, 18-year-old kid made something in Blender, posted it up on the internet. It's really cool, really creepy. And I think Sean Levy and 21 Laps ended up buying it, and they're producing it, and he's directing, as far as I heard. This kid, right? This 17-year-old, for lack of a better term, kid is getting this chance to direct. And I think we're starting to see that trend going. But the big thing for studio films is that everyone wants something that is IP driven or based in reality or inspired by a true story, that they can hang their hat on and say, well, look, this Backrooms video on YouTube got 10 million views. Clearly, there's an audience for it. Let's make it into a feature and tap into that market.
Right.
It's why things like I'm blanking on the name, the Blood and Honey movie. It's not called Winnie the Pooh.
I know. Yeah, I forget what it's called.
Yeah,
I think it's called, like, I think it is called Blood and Honey. But the Winnie the Pooh horror movie, yeah.
Yeah, you're seeing that because, right, it's based on IP. It's public domain, but it's still based on some IP. And almost every single movie that's coming out of studios right now is based in reality, either inspired by a true story, or based on a true story, or it's IP driven in that it has some kind of IP element to it that they're tapping into, whether that's a video game, a comic book, a novel, podcasts, whatever. So
can't wait for Bolded Slugs the movie. It's gonna happen.
I will be the first one to buy a ticket.
You're basically a co-producer at this point, so let's go.
Yeah. I feel like that movie would just be bloodshed, just nonstop John Wick style.
Given some of my hot takes on the tweaks and things like that, it'll have some political things to say for sure. It'll make some statements.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would say, like, if you're trying to get into studio film making or screenwriting, you gotta either find IP, which there's plenty out there, and you can scour the world for it and find something that resonates with you, or you can make your own. We've seen a lot of writers that are turning to comic books to kind of help themselves break in. One of my favorite writers, actually Eric Anthony Glover, who's on Twitter, he wrote a script called Black Star, which won the final draft contest,
Okay.
or placed really highly in it a couple years ago, and never got made into a movie. So he took that, developed it into a comic book, a graphic novel, uh, and got that published. And so now, not only does he have the movie script, but he's got a graphic novel that is based on, that can help him, launch that further. I think we're seeing a trend of a lot of people doing that. They're turning either into media empires themselves, and they're generating it all themselves, or they're partnering up with comic book writers, or graphic novel writers, or novel writers that are in their same voice, in their same vein, that they're partnering with to go off and make the movie. um and it's not always a slam dunk. You can have a script that's based on IP that has a great track record, and still nobody buys it. um we've done that a few times with some IP that we've
Right.
developed, and it's always a bummer, because you're like, I love this thing so much, why doesn't anyone else love it as much as I do? But that's just the way the business works.
In that vein, being kind of, I'm just a writer, I'm just a producer, I'm just a X, Y, or Z. Seeing as how you need to be a bunch of other things, do you think it would benefit or behoove? Oh, I've been waiting to get that word in conversation. Do you think it would benefit people to really stop being so singularly experienced and broaden themselves out? Like, I only write screenplays. Well, maybe you should write a novel. Maybe you should write a comic book. Do you think that really benefits people long term, or is that jack of all trades, master of none, and you don't know enough about everything to really be considered kind of qualified to speak on stuff?
I think it's tough, because there's a trade-off of time, right? Every minute you don't spend writing your script is a minute, that you spend writing a novel is one less minute you're writing your screenplay. And so there's a trade-off. Do I spend an hour writing a novel that I'll then adapt into a
Mm-hmm.
screenplay, or do I just write the screenplay and hope that it catches attention, and it launches my career? And that's a tough answer, or that's a tough question to answer for anyone.
Good. I'm
We
glad I
struggle
asked
with
it.
it as
I asked
well.
a tough question. I'm
Yeah, you
proud
did
proud
ask.
of
Yeah,
me.
I struggle with the same thing. Do I spend an hour doing this, or do I spend an hour doing, working on a script? And it's usually I choose the other thing, because writing is really hard. And
No one likes writing, they love
the
having written, right?
yeah, I love that quote. Um, but I would say, if you I don't think that in this business you can be just a writer anymore. The same way I don't think you can be just an actor anymore. I think you have to be a multi hyphenate, because you're generating the content. You're generating what's going to be adapted into it. You're helping to form the movie. Even in TV, if you're a TV writer, you still rise up the ranks to eventually the end goal is to become a showrunner, right?
And
And that's
there's
not
so many things a showrunner does that are well beyond writing. Absolutely.
right. Yeah, exactly. You have to have a full scope of understanding of how a film is made, or how a TV show is made, in that analogy. And I think it's important for writers to learn more about the business,
Mm-hmm.
to learn more about producing. Um, I was really inspired in my career early on by folks like Alex Kurtzman, and like I was saying, Ross.
Roberta Orkey?
Or yeah, yeah. Because they started out as just writers, and then they eventually got into producing, and now I think they split up, but they still produce and write.
In the mid
And I think,
2000s, their name was on almost absolutely everything, whether they wrote it or produced
yeah,
it. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and it's really inspiring seeing a writer go on to that. And it's not for everybody. Sometimes there's writers that they're more introverted, they don't understand the business, they don't want to understand the business, they want to just write. And in that instance, I think that's fine, but try to develop some kind of outside IP to base your scripts on, or scour the internet and find a true life horror story that hasn't been told yet, and try to tell that story. Because those, you want to make it as easy for someone to say yes to you as possible.
Right.
And the more things that you can give to them, the more elements that are already in place that they don't have to go and find, the easier it is for them to say yes. If you come to them with a script that's completely wholly original, yeah, they might say yes to it, and maybe they can get it made, but it's still going to be very difficult. And it's much easier to just say no to that one and say yes to another one that already has, it's based on something, it's inspired by reality.
Every true crime podcast right now is absolutely like, this guy says I should make a movie.
This guy, yeah.
So no, I get
Yeah.
it though. Is being 100% completely original is harder now than I think it ever has been, given just the way people view. I hate the word content because it just sounds so sterile. It doesn't.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a world where that is what, the finance bros, the MBAs, that the 7 people that run things, that's the way that they think, and that's the way that they think we think, even though we have tried to tell them that that's not the case at all for years.
I think I think they've started using the word content to mean story in any form, right? There's no word that if I
would say narrative, but
about
I'm an elitist prick.
Narrative, that's a good one. But even then, like, a narrative to me feels more like a novel and less like a graphic novel. So
fair point.
Is there we need to come up with a term that's not content, because content does feel like something you throw up on YouTube or TikTok. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what.
Oh, I would argue there's a shit ton wrong with that, but we're not going to name those YouTubers. We don't have enough time. But I get what you're saying. It feels like it is a word that is meant for a different section, like YouTube, Twitch. That.
Oh, I think I lost you.
Oh, I'm still here. We have technical difficulties again.
Oh, that was very strange. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. I didn't lose you on my end.
You can hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. Sorry to make you not edit that. That was weird. I just totally lost audio from you for some reason.
Listen, we've been warned, I don't know how many times, of the impending doom solar flares that are going to ruin the internet for 20 years. It's a holiday weekend. Maybe this is just the universe telling us to just get off the damn computer.
Yeah. The internet's taking a break.
This is a perfect opportunity for my unnecessarily abrupt and hand-fisted segue to my favorite segment of the show, where I call it Pick a Fight. And this is ostensibly you just picking a fight with something in the industry that you hate, whether that's contests, log lines, Bolded Slugs, to name a few, that you just think is either unnecessarily stupid and should stop, or something you wish you saw more of that for whatever reason has just been under a rock that no one does anymore.
Okay, I have 2. The first one that I absolutely loathe is anytime someone replies to a screenplay query or a production query or anything where you're trying to pitch them, and their answer is thanks, but not for us, or they say thanks, but we're going to pass it this time. If they've taken the time to read the script, they should take the time to tell you why they're passing. It seems so nebulous to throw a script out there and put yourself as the writer out there into the world and have people say, okay, I read it, I didn't like it, but I'm not going to tell you why. I'm not going to tell you how to improve upon it. I'm not going to give you any notes. And I know why they do that, because number one, they don't have time, and number two, I
think they have time. I think that's an excuse, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. But I think they don't want to be liable in case you use their idea or take their note in some way. And I'll say, like, the people that I pitch to that respond with a pass, but in the same email will give me a paragraph or two of why they didn't like it and what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. It makes it immensely easier for me to say, okay, great, I understand why this wasn't for you. It's going to help me bring you stuff that I think you're going to like in the future, instead of
give me something to work with. Absolutely. Just a little nugget of, not for me, if it was this, maybe, or this would maybe they're not going to say, hey, this would work for somebody else, but something that you can at least wrap your head around to be like, I mean, it's one step up
I
from
didn't
being
connect to
ghosted.
characters enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Ghosting is so annoying. I respond to every message because I feel like everyone deserves at least some kind of response, even if it's, hey, this logline isn't for us. We do action and horror movies. We're not into dramas. That's a viable excuse to not read a script,
Right.
but just to read something and then pass. We didn't like it. Pass. Just feels very, I don't know. I hate it. And the other thing that I hate is just the fact that we as a film industry don't have a centralized place to get financing. Like venture capital has, Angel List and Y Combinator and all these other places where you can connect with investors that want to invest in tech, but film investors just feel so like hidden behind a veil that nobody except for the people that know them can access. I hate that so much because even like the executive producer credits on movies aren't usually the investors. The investors usually are never credited for valuable reasons, but it's just, it bothers me that indie filmmakers don't have more access to.
There should be a pool, a damn mutual fund, something.
Yeah.
Just give.
Yeah.
No.
Or a list of like, these investors invested in this movie and the movie did really well, and maybe they're going to want to invest in another movie like that, because that's how the tech world works. They invest in Facebook, they make a bunch of money, and then they invest in the next social media thing, the TikTok or the Snapchats. Just and they make a bunch of money from that.
Give people a chance to make, because proof of concept is one thing, but if I'm financing everything myself at that point, then what do I need you for? Like there needs to be some sort of, no, that's super valuable. Yeah, no, I completely understand that and appreciate that, because that means that people would have access to opportunities that right now, I mean, that's the point of this podcast. It's like, where the hell do we go? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ty, I appreciate your time. Right before we get out of here, where can people find you? Where can people find your stuff? Shout your socials. We'll drop them in the show notes. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, I'm almost exclusively on X now, and I hate calling it X, but you can find me on there at Ty Leisher, TYLEISHER. I'm mostly exclusively there pretty much. And aside from that, my website, exit44ent.com. You can contact us there and see some cool movies that we've made.
Appreciate it. All right. The fastest 30 minutes into business. Appreciate your time. Ty, thank you very much for stopping by Bolded Slugs.
Thank you, Zeus. Appreciate
it. Later,
man.
Bolded Slugs, the podcast, would like to thank our partners at filmsnobbery.com for hosting our show. Today's music is Sublime by Ken Bashari from the Free Music Archive, licensed under Creative Commons. Bolded Slugs, the podcast, is a Dapper Duck media production.